In a world full of noise, distractions, and borrowed identities, there is one place where truth still speaks quietly. Welcome to a space where stories are not just heard, but felt. Where psychology meets life, where identity is questioned, and where every story becomes a mirror. This is not just an audiobook channel. This is a journey inward. Because the most powerful stories are the ones that reveal who you really are. You're listening to premium audiobooks, where every story transforms the way you see yourself.
Tonight, we travel into a world where money floats, where identity can be bought, and where human worth is measured in the shadows. London. Not the London of postcards and palaces, but the London beneath the bridges, where the river keeps secrets. And in this story, we begin not with kings, not with heroes, but with those who live closest to the truth of life. Those who survive. Because before society teaches us manners, life teaches us hunger. And hunger never speaks politely. Chapter 1. The River That Feeds and Devours. An old boat moves across the Thames. No lantern, no fisherman's gear, no trade. Just a father and his daughter, and they are searching. But not for fish. They are searching for the dead. Pause here. Yes, the dead. Because in their world, death is income. And this is where Dickens begins to whisper a brutal truth. Morality often changes when survival enters the room. Character psychology break. The father, Gaffer Hexam, is not evil. He's adapted. When a human being lives long enough near desperation, their conscience doesn't disappear. It rearranges. He doesn't rob the dead. In his mind, he rescues what the world left behind. Because poverty has a dangerous philosophy. If life never gave me fairness, why should I owe fairness to life? Scene: the boat. The daughter, Rose. Her name is Lizzie. And while her father scans the water with sharp eyes, she watches his face, not with trust, but with fear. She doesn't fear the river. She fears what the river makes of her father. There's a stain in the boat, dark, shaped like something once human. The sunlight hits it. It looks like diluted blood. She shivers. And in that small moment, Dickens plants one of the deepest human conflicts. What feeds your body can poison your soul. Reflection pause. Have you ever felt this? Doing something necessary, but feeling yourself drifting away from who you wanted to be? That quiet discomfort, that's the soul resisting adaptation. Lizzie still feels it. Her father no longer does. That is the difference between innocence and survival. The discovery. Suddenly, the boat jerks. The father reaches, pulls something from the water. We don't see it, but we hear coins. He washes them, blows on them, spits on them for luck. Money, taken from a drowned body. And here, Dickens delivers a dark philosophical line through Gaffer. What use has a dead man for money? Sounds logical, sounds practical, sounds terrifyingly reasonable. Deep lesson insert. Human beings justify anything if they can build a sentence around it. That's how corruption begins, not with evil, with explanation. Father and daughter dialogue adapted. Father: this river fed you since you were born. Daughter, softly: I know, but I cannot love what frightens me.
And there it is, gratitude versus morality. When your survival depends on something dark, can you afford to reject it? Social commentary segment. Dickens is not talking about the river. He is talking about society. There are people who feed on systems and systems that feed on people. And many times the dirtiest jobs belong to the poorest hands, not because they are worse, but because they had fewer choices. Tension build. Another boat approaches, a rival, another river scavenger. He calls Gaffer partner. Gaffer refuses. Why? Because even among those who live in darkness, there are rules. He says, "You stole from the living, that is wrong. I take from the dead, that is different." Moral hierarchy inside immorality. Human beings never stop creating order, even in chaos. Ending reflection of Part 1. The boat disappears into the night. The father satisfied, the daughter silent. And we, the listeners, are left with the first question of this journey. If survival forced you, where would your morality bend? Because this story is not about Victorian London. It is about money, identity, worth, and the quiet compromises that build a life.
The people who bought their identity. The river fades, but the dirt does not disappear. It only changes clothes. We leave the cold water of the Thames and enter warm rooms, golden lights, polished silver, and yet the moral atmosphere still suffocating. Because tonight we meet a different kind of survival. Not physical survival, social survival. And it is just as ruthless. Scene: the Veneerings. A brand new house in a brand new neighborhood owned by brand new people. Mr. and Mrs. Veneering. Everything about them is new. The furniture smells new. The friendships are new. The servants are new. Even their stories are new. Nothing about them has history. And Dickens gives them a name that is not accidental. Veneering, like veneer, a thin decorative surface covering ordinary wood. There are people who build a life, and there are people who build an image. The Veneerings are not evil. They are empty, and emptiness, when mixed with money, becomes performance. Tonight, they host a grand dinner. Silver shines, wine flows, laughter floats through the room, but no one knows anyone. Not really. Every guest is introduced as one of our oldest friends, but they met last week. This is social theater, and the rule of this theater is simple. The more artificial the connection, the more enthusiastic the performance. Have you ever sat in a room where everyone smiled but no one was real? Where conversations felt rehearsed, where people talked not to connect but to position themselves? That is the Veneering world. Politeness without sincerity, charm without warmth, networking instead of friendship. One guest stands out, Mr. Twemelow. A polite, confused man. He spends the entire evening asking himself one question. Am I their oldest friend or their newest friend? And this sounds funny, but psychologically it is devastating. Because when relationships are built on usefulness, you never know where you stand. When you enter circles where status is currency, you stop being a person. You become a role, and roles can be replaced. People compliment each other excessively. Charming house, delightful evening, old friend. But every smile hides calculation. Who is wealthy?
Who has connections? Who can open doors? This is not a dinner. This is an investment meeting disguised as elegance. Notice the contrast Dickens builds. The river world, the veneering world, dirt outside, dirt inside, survival for food, survival for status, brutal honesty, polished deception, poverty's desperation, wealth's insecurity. Different clothes, same fear. Enter the story within the story. At dinner, a tale is told about a man named Harmon. His father was rich, obscenely rich. His wealth came from dust, garbage, waste, refuse. He built mountains of trash and turned it into fortune. Think about this. A man who became rich from society's waste, and now society's elite sit at a table eating fine food in a house funded by what others threw away. Dickens is whispering, the foundations of wealth are rarely clean. The rich father disowned his children, cruel, cold, obsessed with control. But after death, his will shocks everyone. All the money goes to his lost son, Harmon, with one condition. He must marry a specific woman, a woman chosen not by love, but by contract. Control beyond the grave. Some people don't just want power, they want to shape lives even after they're gone. This is not love, this is ownership. As the story is told, a note arrives, a messenger boy from the river, from the world we left behind, and suddenly the polished room grows still. Mortimer reads the note. His face changes. He says, "The man is drowned." Silence. The heir to the fortune, dead in the river. The river and society just collided. The poor world found the rich world. Death erased status. Money, titles, inheritance, all meaningless to the current of the Thames. Pause here. This is the first major message of the book. You can spend your life building identity from money and lose everything in a moment you never see coming. The veneerings try to control how they are seen, but life is not impressed by presentation. In the river, death meant income. Here, death means shock. Same event, different meaning. Your environment defines what tragedy is. Two worlds now connected, a drowned man, a hidden fortune, a forced marriage, a lie about to grow larger. And beneath it all, the question deepens. Is identity something we own or something the world assigns to us? Because soon we will meet a man who is not who he seems, and a woman whose worth is about to be tested.
The man who disappeared and the identity that replaced him. A man is dead. A fortune is waiting. A marriage is required. And no one has met the heir. This is the perfect place for a lie to be born. Because whenever wealth exists without a face, someone will try to become that face. We return to the shore, to the boy who brought the note, to the family who live between mud and survival, the Hexams, Gaffer, the father, Lizzie, the daughter, Charlie, the son. They found the body. But the body is not just a corpse, it is a key to inheritance, a key to identity, a key to power. Most people think identity is something stable. It is not. It is a story people agree to believe. Change the story, and the identity changes. Charlie is different from his father. He can read, he thinks, he watches, and he feels shame about their life. He doesn't want to live from death. He wants education, escape, respect. Here, Dickens shows a generational truth. One generation survives, the next generation wants dignity. Have you ever felt embarrassed by the world you came from? Not because you hated your family, but because you wanted more than survival. That conflict can either build you or make you resent everything. Lizzie senses this. She doesn't have language for it, but she feels the imbalance. Meanwhile, in a completely different part of London, a quiet, educated young man appears. His name, John Rocksmith. He applies for work as a secretary. Polite, intelligent, but strange, reserved, watching everything. He seems like a man with a secret, because he is. Here, Dickens begins one of his greatest themes. Sometimes the person you meet is only a version of someone else. Rocksmith is not lying, but he is not revealing. And that space between truth and silence is where mystery lives. The drowned man is believed to be Harmon, but doubts begin to rise. The body was damaged, identification uncertain. No one knew his face well. Only papers in pockets. But papers can be placed. Names can be taken. Lives can be swapped. Why is identity fragile? Because society believes evidence more than truth. A signature, a document, a label. And suddenly, a human being becomes that thing. The veneering world cares about titles, appearances, wealth. The river world cares about bread, survival, tomorrow. But now, both worlds depend on the same question. Who was the man in the water? Notice something powerful here. The poor girl Lizzie feels guilty for touching money from the dead. The rich dinner guests feel excitement about inheritance from the dead. Different moral responses, same event. Money doesn't change human nature, it reveals it. If Harmon is dead, the fortune changes hands. If he lives, everything changes. And somewhere in London, a man with a new name is watching, learning, waiting. What if you could leave your past behind and become someone new? Would you? Or would guilt follow you? Reinvention is freedom, but also a burden, because the truth never disappears, it only waits. We now have 4 key emotional paths growing. 1. Lizzie, goodness trapped in harsh reality. 2. Charlie, ambition fighting shame. 3. Riderhood, fascination without responsibility. 4. Rocksmith, identity hidden for a reason. And beneath them all, the ghost of Harmon, dead or simply not yet revealed. The river gave up a body, society claimed a fortune, a man walks London under another name, a girl rose towards a future she doesn't yet see. And the question deepens. Is a person defined by where they came from or by the choice of who they decide to become? Because soon, truth will not surface gently. It will collide.
Attraction, illusion, and the weight of class. Some dangers do not arrive with noise. They arrive as a tension, a look that lingers, a voice that softens, a presence that feels important. And that is how Lizzie's real test begins, not from poverty, but from being seen. Rogue riderhood continues to appear, well-dressed, educated, charming. Everything her world is not. But what draws him is not love, it is contrast. To him, Lizzie is a story, a symbol, a rebellion against his class, but not a responsibility. There is a form of attraction that feeds the ego. It says, "Look how open-minded I am. Look how different my choices are. Look how brave I am to step outside my world." But it never asks,
can I carry the emotional cost of this person's life? Riderhood is fascinated by Lizzie, but he is not prepared for her reality. Lizzie feels something she has never felt before. Not love, possibility. For the first time, someone from the other world speaks to her like she matters. But deep down, she senses danger. Not physical danger, but moral danger. Because she knows he can leave, she cannot. This is one of the most painful human dynamics. When two people stand in different worlds, one sees romance, the other sees risk. Meanwhile, Charlie rises. He studies harder, talks sharper, acts embarrassed by his father. He wants education, status, escape. And here Dickens gives us a brutal truth. When someone rises, they sometimes feel they must step on where they came from. Charlie starts to judge his own family, not because he is evil, because he is afraid of being pulled back. Success without emotional maturity can turn into arrogance. When we climb socially, we must choose, carry our roots with respect or erase them in shame. John Rokesmith, the quiet watcher. Rokesmith now works in a wealthy household, observing, listening, learning. He is always polite, always careful, as if one mistake could expose him, because it could. He lives in two realities, the one people see and the one he hides. Living with a hidden identity creates constant tension. You measure every word, you avoid attachments, you fear recognition. Freedom through disguise, but imprisonment through secrecy. Riderhood begins to pursue Lizzie more openly. People notice, whispers begin, and suddenly class becomes a weapon. She's beneath him, he's lowering himself, she must have trapped him. Notice something important. When a poor person reaches up, society calls it ambition. When a rich person reaches down, society calls it scandal. Class is not just money, it is permission. Who is allowed to love whom? Who is allowed to dream what? Who is allowed to move freely? Lizzie is not fighting people, she is fighting invisible rules. She begins to withdraw, to distance herself, not because she doesn't care, but because she cares too much. She knows if she stays, he risks nothing. She risks everything. Real love often looks like distance, because love that protects ego comes closer. Love that protects the other sometimes walks away. Lizzie chooses dignity over fantasy. That is strength. Notice the mirror. Lizzie hides feelings to protect someone else. Rokesmith hides identity to protect something bigger. Both live in silence. Both carry weight. Both stand between worlds. Questions grow louder. Why does Rokesmith seem connected to the inheritance story? Why does he avoid personal history? Why does he watch the same people linked to Harmon? Because the past is circling back, and truth does not stay buried, not in rivers, not in lives. Have you ever had to choose between what you feel and what is safe? Between possibility and dignity? Those choices shape who we become, not the easy days, the hard refusals. Lizzie walks away from the dream. Charlie walks away from his roots. Rokesmith walks carefully inside a lie. Riderhood walks towards consequences he doesn't understand. 4 people, all trying to rise, all risking losing themselves. The river still flows, the wealthy still perform, the truth still hides. But now the emotional stakes are real, because from this point forward,
Masks begin to crack, and when identity breaks, pain follows.
Attraction, illusion, and the weight of class.
Lies are heavy. Secrets are heavier. But truth is pressure. It rises like something trapped beneath water. And when it rises, someone always drowns. Rokesmith grows restless. His calm becomes effort. His silence becomes tension. Because every conversation now feels dangerous. He hears the name Harmon mentioned again. He sees people discussing the inheritance, and he watches their reactions carefully, not with greed, with something deeper, responsibility. Living under a false identity is not thrilling, it is exhausting. Every smile must be measured, every friendship limited, every memory censored. Freedom without recognition is lonely, and Rokesmith feels that weight. Rogue Riderhood's fascination turns darker. He doesn't like losing. What began as curiosity becomes obsession, and obsession mixed with ego becomes control. He tries to isolate Lizzie, tries to convince her she needs him. Classic emotional manipulation. You don't belong anywhere else. No one else understands you. I'm the only one who sees you. Attention can turn into a cage. When admiration becomes possession, love becomes threat. Lizzie sees it, and her fear grows. Charlie now stands in educated circles, speaks differently, acts superior. He corrects his father publicly, distances himself from Lizzie's world. And here comes one of Dickens' sharpest psychological truths. Shame about your origin can be more painful than poverty itself. Charlie thinks education will free him, but internally he is splitting in two. Growth should expand identity, not erase it. If success requires you to deny your past, it becomes another prison. Rumors spread. Questions about the drowned man grow. Some believe Harmon never died. Some suspect deception. And quietly, Riderhood begins to connect pieces. He knows rivers, he knows bodies, he knows lies, and he senses opportunity. Riderhood is not deep, but he is dangerous, because shallow people often chase power the hardest. He begins to wonder, what if the heir lives, and what if I can profit from knowing it? He watches Lizzie from afar, not romantically yet, but with recognition. He sees goodness surviving in hardship. He sees dignity under pressure, and it reminds him of something he lost, his original self. When you pretend long enough, you start forgetting who you were. Rokesmith's disguise protected him, but it also buried him. Lizzie becomes a mirror, not of wealth, but of honesty. Meanwhile, in wealthy rooms, people discuss inheritance like strategy. Who benefits, who gains status, who moves up. No one speaks of the dead man as human, only as asset. The poor touch death with sorrow. The rich discuss death with calculation. Both live in the same world, but not the same emotional universe. Three forces now move toward collision: Rogue Riderhood, suspicion and greed; Rokesmith, truth and burden; and Lizzie, dignity and danger. And above them the question hangs, what if Harmon never drowned? Imagine having the chance to erase your identity, to start over. Would you take it? And if you did, could you ever tell the truth again? because every secret builds interest, and eventually the debt is due. Lizzie chooses isolation, better alone than used, better quiet than controlled, but strength is heavy when carried alone. She feels invisible between classes, too poor for one world, too dignified for the other. Belonging is one of the deepest human needs and the most painful absence. Riderhood moves closer to discovering something. Rokesmith moves closer to confession. Lizzie moves closer to danger. And the city keeps moving, unaware. The river once hid a body. Now it hides a truth. And soon someone will try to drag that truth out, not for justice, but for power. Because when identity is exposed, lives don't return to normal. They break and rebuild.
The truth that refused to stay buried. There comes a moment in every hidden life when silence becomes heavier than confession, when fear of exposure is weaker than the weight of pretending, and that moment has arrived. Rokesmith walks at night. No servants, no polished rooms, no performance, just footsteps and thought. He replays everything, the river, the body, the inheritance, the people who change their behavior around money. And one truth grows louder inside him. I did not disappear to escape life. I disappeared to understand it. Sometimes people step away from identity not to hide, but to observe who they would be without it, without expectations, without wealth, without labels. Rokesmith didn't just lose his name, he studied the world without it. Riderhood has been watching too. He connects pieces, a drowned air, a body not clearly identified, a quiet, educated man appearing at the right time. Coincidences that don't feel like coincidences. And greed sharpens his mind. He doesn't want truth, he wants leverage. There are people who don't care what is right, they care what is useful. Truth becomes currency, secrets become weapons, and riderhood smells profit. Lizzie feels something coming, not logically, emotionally, a tension in the air. Riderhood's tone changed, his gaze hardened, his charm disappeared. She realizes she was never admired, she was assessed. There's a moment when illusion breaks, when attention turns into threat, and instinct says, leave. Lizzie prepares to step away from everything familiar, because survival sometimes means movement. Charlie's new world doesn't accept him fully. He thought education would erase his past, but whispers follow him, background, family, origin, and he feels a truth he tried to outrun. You can change your position faster than you can change how others see you. Ambition gave him distance, but not belonging. Rising socially without emotional grounding creates loneliness at the top. You leave one world, but never fully enter the other. The first direct threat. Riderhood approaches Rokesmith. Casual tone, careful words, but hidden blade. He hints at knowledge, mentions the river, mentions the air, watches Rokesmith's eyes, and there it is, a flicker, recognition. Riderhood speaks in suggestions, Rokesmith responds in calm logic, but both know this is not conversation, this is negotiation without stating the price. For the first time, Rokesmith faces the cost of reinvention. To live as someone else, you depend on silence, and silence can be sold. Every hidden truth puts power in someone else's hands.
What we hide doesn't disappear. It transfers control. Lizzie quietly prepares to leave her environment, not dramatically, not loudly, but with firm resolve, because she understands something deep. Staying where you are disrespected slowly destroys the soul. She would rather walk into uncertainty than remain where she feels unsafe. That is courage. Riderhood now has suspicion. Rokesmith has truth. Lizzie has decision. 3 paths moving toward collision. And above them all, the inheritance waits. The question waits. Society waits. Identity is not just who you are. It is who others believe you are. And when those don't match, conflict is inevitable. Rokesmith realizes hiding can't continue. Riderhood realizes exposure can be profitable. Lizzie realizes love without safety is not love. Charlie realizes success without roots feels empty. 4 awakenings, same city, same moment. The truth is no longer sleeping. It is turning. Soon, names will be spoken, masks will fall, intentions will be revealed. And when that happens, some will be freed, others will be destroyed. Because truth doesn't negotiate. It arrives.
The truth that refused to stay buried. A secret can survive suspicion. It can survive distance. It can even survive time, but it cannot survive confrontation. And tonight, confrontation arrives. Rokesmith stands before a mirror, not adjusting clothes, adjusting courage. He understands something now. Hiding protected him once, now it endangers others, especially Lizzie, because Riderhood's suspicion has teeth, and silence feeds it. There's a moment when truth stops being a risk and becomes a responsibility. Rokesmith reaches that moment. Riderhood approaches again, less subtle now. He speaks of the drowned air, of papers, of timing, of chance. Then he says it plainly. Some men die, and others inherit their names. A trap laid in words. He waits for fear, for denial, for weakness. But Rokesmith doesn't crumble. He doesn't argue. He doesn't threaten. He looks at Riderhood calmly and says, and some men mistake suspicion for intelligence. Power shift. Riderhood wanted control. Instead, he meets certainty, because Rokesmith now knows. Truth told at the right time is stronger than truth hidden. Meanwhile, Lizzie prepares to leave entirely. She sees clearly now. Riderhood's attention was ownership. Society's judgment was prison. Silence was suffocation. She chooses motion, not towards romance, towards safety, towards dignity, towards self-respect. Sometimes the bravest act is not fighting, it is walking away before damage defines you. Charlie hears rumors linking his family again to the river story. His new friends grow distant, polite smiles, cool tones, and he feels the truth crash down. Education changed his vocabulary, not his origins. He feels anger at the world, at his father, at himself, but underneath he feels fear of never belonging. Running from your roots doesn't remove them, it removes your anchor, and people without anchors drift. Rokesmith arranges a private meeting. He can't let whispers grow.
He speaks, not loudly, but clearly. He explains the night of the supposed drowning, the circumstances, the choice to step away, the decision to observe life without the weight of wealth, and finally, he speaks the name, Harmon. He is the heir, alive, not greedy, but transformed. He didn't fake death for money. He escaped identity to understand humanity. He saw how people act around wealth, how status bends truth, how character appears when no one knows who you are. Shock, silence, then something unexpected, not celebration, reflection, because this revelation exposes everyone. Who showed kindness without benefit, who calculated, who performed friendship. Truth doesn't just reveal the hidden man, it reveals the visible ones. Riderhood's power depended on mystery. Once truth is spoken openly, his leverage dissolves. Secrets control, honesty frees. He tried to trade in shadows, but the light ruins his business. Riderhood used information for control. Rokesmith used truth for responsibility. Same knowledge, different character. Lizzie learns who he is, but more importantly, she understands why he hid. Not deception, search. Not pride, growth. She sees a man who stepped away from privilege and came back with humility. For the first time, two people from different worlds stand equal, not by class, by character. Who are you when no one knows your name? That question shaped Rokesmith, and now it asks itself to everyone else. The name is spoken, the mask falls, the secret ends, but consequences begin, because truth does not close stories, it opens the real ones. And now, every relationship must be rebuilt without illusion.
Title: After the Truth. Who are you now? Revelation feels dramatic, but the real work begins after. Because when masks fall, people must decide, do I change or do I defend who I pretended to be? Now that his identity is known, Harmon feels lighter and heavier. Lighter because hiding is over. Heavier because expectations return. Wealth returns, status returns, attention returns. But he is not the same man who left. He saw life without privilege, and he cannot unsee it. Growth creates distance between who you were and who the world still thinks you are. Harmon must choose, return to the old role, or redefine what it means to hold power. Lizzie stands in a moment of emotional clarity. She did not chase wealth. She did not cling to attention. She chose safety and self-respect. And now she sees something rare, a man who stepped down from power instead of using it. Her feelings are no longer mixed with fear, because now she stands beside someone, not beneath them. Healthy connection is built on equality of character, not equality of status. Charlie faces the hardest truth of all. He tried to outrun his past, but now he sees. His sister's dignity earned respect. His brother-in-law's humility earned admiration, and his own pride earned distance. He feels shame, but this time the shame is honest. There are two kinds of shame, one that makes you hide and one that makes you grow. Charlie reaches the second. Riderhood fades. Not dramatically, not with a grand punishment, but with something worse for a man like him, irrelevance. Without secrets, he has nothing to trade.
Without manipulation, he has no power. He is left with himself. And that is the fate of people who build identity on control. When influence is built on deception, it collapses when light enters. The veneering world shifts tone. Some try to act like they always knew. Some change their friendliness. Some distance themselves quietly. Because people often adjust their morals after they see who has power. Truth exposes character, but it also reveals who bends toward advantage. Harmon sees clearly now who treated him as human and who treated him as opportunity. Harmon speaks to Lizzie openly, not as rescuer, not as benefactor, but as equal. He thanks her, not for loving him, but for being the same person in every circumstance. That constancy is what he searched for. In a world obsessed with image, the rarest quality is consistency of character. Lizzie had it, before wealth, after revelation, unchanged. The story began with a question: is identity what we are given or what we choose? Now we see. Identity is forged in hidden moments, in how we act when no reward is visible, in how we treat people who cannot benefit us. If your title disappeared, if your income vanished, if your social circle changed, who would you still be? That is your real identity. Lizzie, dignity to safety to respect. Harmon, wealth to anonymity to wisdom. Charlie, ambition to arrogance to humility. Riderhood, manipulation to exposure to emptiness. Every character faced a mirror. Some learned, some resisted. The river still flows, but it no longer hides the central truth, because the real river in this story was identity, and now the current is clear. But one final step remains: forgiveness, integration, and choosing what kind of life to build after illusion.
Title: What Remains When Illusion is Gone? Opening transition. Stories don't end when problems are solved. They end when people understand who they have become. And now, after secrets, disguises, pride, shame, love, and loss, we ask the final question: what remains when illusion is gone? Harmon. Power redefined. Harmon stands not as a man who regained wealth, but as a man who outgrew it. He knows now, money can buy comfort, it can buy influence, it can buy noise, but it cannot buy character, peace, or love freely given. Because he lived without his fortune and saw who he truly was without it. Life philosophy insert. Power without self-knowledge corrupts. Power after humility transforms. Harmon doesn't return to wealth as owner, he returns as steward. He understands responsibility, and that is the difference between possession and maturity. Lizzie. Quiet strength rewarded. Lizzie never chased elevation. She chose integrity when no one was watching. She walked away when staying was easier. She protected her dignity when illusion was tempting. And life answered her not with luxury, but with something rarer, a relationship where she is seen not as symbol, not as charity, not as fantasy, but as equal. Emotional truth. The strongest people are often the quietest, because their strength is not performance, it is principle. Charlie. Humility learned. Charlie's journey ends not in success, but in understanding. He sees now his anger came from fear, his pride came from insecurity, his distance came from shame. And when he stops fighting where he came from, he finally begins to grow beyond it. Universal lesson. Maturity begins when blame ends. Riderhood, the empty end. Riderhood fades from importance. No dramatic fall, no heroic redemption, just irrelevance. Because a life built on manipulation collapses quietly. Not every story ends with transformation. Some end with exposure. Society unmasked. The veneering world continues. Dinners, smiles, performances. Because society rarely changes, but individuals do. And that is where real stories live. Deep social message. You cannot fix the world's illusions, but you can refuse to live inside them. Final emotional resolution. Harmon and Lizzie represent something rare. Two people who met across class, not through rebellion, not through fantasy, but through shared values discovered in hardship. Their connection was not built on rescue, it was built on recognition. Core message of the story. This story was never about inheritance, it was about identity. Never about money, about moral weight. Never about status, about self-worth. Final reflection segment. The river in this story carried bodies, but the deeper river carried illusions of status, illusions of superiority, illusions of control, illusions of identity tied to wealth. And one by one, those illusions drowned, leaving only character. Ask the listener. If everything external was stripped away, your job, your title, your income, your image, who would still remain? That person is your real self. Build that, protect that, because everything else can sink. Cinematic closing. The river flows, but now it reflects the sky. The city moves, but some hearts are still. Because growth is quiet, truth is steady, and identity, real identity, does not need performance. Outro for audiobook. You have just traveled through a world of shadows and surfaces and found what lives underneath. If this journey spoke to you, if you felt seen, if it made you question who you are beneath your roles, then carry this with you. You are not your circumstances, not your past, not your image. You are your choices, especially when no one is watching.